And
I'm going to introduce our speakers,
Okay.
starting with Australia.
Yes.
Yep. So Australia Tobon is a Whatcom County Promotora at Community Development, also known as C2C. A lot of you probably are aware of C2C. She helps to organize local rural campesino and immigrant families to be in the forefront of their own stories, issues, and solutions, while connecting farm workers to resources and providing know your rights orientations. She couldn't be with us here in person today, but she left us a message. I introduce all of them first, and then
Let's do it one by one.
one by one.
Hi everyone, my name is Australia Tobon. I am a Promotora community organizer for Whatcom County with the organization Community Development. And I just wanted to share with you all my apologies for not being there in person to be part of this panel discussion about this amazing documentary just watched called A is for Angicos, about Paulo Freire's work with transforming education. And again, we just want to spread the love and support to all those around the world who still to this day use the pedagogy of Paulo Freire in their work and organizing. I just wanted to share with you some brief remarks. Just watch the film just like y'all, and I'm just in awe. The C2C organization mobilizes farm workers in Whatcom and Skagit counties. And as a farm worker is a daughter of immigrants, part of the community here in Whatcom County, I saw a lot of parallels of the film in the work that we do every day. We have a base of promotoras, people on the ground, women who are on the ground from the farm worker community, trying to do changes for the betterment of the community, and also to push for policy and systematic changes in terms of worker justice, environmental justice, and just great things from Mother Earth. And what we noticed from the film was the fact that there was a big push of a shift of education, that there's no teachers, no professors. The term even literacy classes puts the person receiving the information of education on the end of a receiver that doesn't know anything. For our farm workers, they have so much life experience that you can't teach in a classroom. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we use as a tool, as organizers, as promotoras, is to have farm workers be co-creators of knowledge. And we use this in many different ways. One of the biggest pieces of work that we're still working on is the COVID-19 farm worker study that we were involved in with other organizers in Oregon and in California and Washington. This is a huge study that we did, community data driven, campesinas, farm workers on the front lines, doing surveys, serving our own community about what's going on with COVID, how are they protecting themselves, what's going on in the workplace, housing, medical, and other themes. What we learned from the study was not just gathering data from our community, it's how much our community knew how to protect themselves initially from the virus when there was no support from government, local, state, and national to protect them, even though they were deemed essential. We also saw this in terms of ways that community has used historical knowledge of protecting themselves against pesticides to now confront how to protect themselves from the virus. It actually sparked another conversation about what was mentioned in the film, about deeper discussions of the state of the lives of people who are not considered in policy, not considered with worker protections, and just understanding from our base, our community farm workers, that what can be possible? What can be possible if we change things? What are some weapons, ways that we can protect ourselves and our community through this pandemic, and also help others with strengthening protections related to workers at the workplace, the immigration system, and other intersecting issues like environmental justice related to wildfires, heat, and smoke. The survey was a conduit to that. When we reported back to the farm workers as Promotoras as an organization, it was, again, a model of co-creating knowledge with farm workers and asking, where do we go from here? Where do we push? Where are we most comfortable? Where do we want to learn more? What were the outcomes of all this data that was provided for this survey? And there's been some really great outcomes. Again, I think the film highlights this politicalization of our farm workers. You just don't do a study and then go away from the community and not commit to the community's needs. It's actually walking alongside community and allowing the fact that you don't go ahead of them, you are accompanying them, you're walking with them, as even the film indicated. And just like supporting community to their fullest potential for what they know and what they have access to, their life experiences, what they see day to day with their workers, what are the cultural nuances, since we have quite a bit of an indigenous workforce for farm workers in the western side state of the Washington state, but allowing people to mobilize and using terminology that is local. We don't, when we did these studies with farm workers, they participated, we use common language in our areas. We have predominantly a large Central American indigenous workforce in Whatcom, rather large indigenous workforce from Mexico and Whatcom and Skagit. The word and terminology and the visuals we use in the report back were all visually based. And we use whiteboards and other tools to explain things that are really pertinent to what's going on in our communities. So I think, again, Paulo's legacy lives on, and it lives on with a lot of this work that we do at C2C and many other organizations and movements around the US and the world. A final note, I think that with the pandemic and with all that is going on, our communities will find ways to receive information, share information, and survive. Without our farm workers, our food system will not survive. And if we don't support them and their rights and their dignity, we will not have food left. So it is a mutual giving that we need to continue supporting in this fight and the struggle. Thank you so much for listening to my comments, and enjoy your night.
Our next panelist, we're honored to have Aaron Dixon. He was a co-founder of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. He has later worked for many nonprofits. He is the founder of Central House. He ran for US Senate and for Washington State as a Green Party candidate. And we are very grateful to have him back. He was a keynote speaker along with Walida Marisha in September 2020 for our virtual International Day of Peace celebration. So again, welcome, Aaron. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Well, I didn't get a chance to see the film, but that's okay. I was looking forward to seeing that film. But anyway, Ferreira's understanding of education was so right on. He understood that education was liberation, and that without education, it would be very difficult for people to be able to achieve liberation from the slavers and from the colonizers. Of course, the slave masters in America understood this very clearly. This is why slaves were not allowed to be taught to read. And they even made it punishable for anyone to be teaching slaves how to read. So the fact that he was able to understand that and write this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which focused on the importance of education and how education leads to liberation. And we can see that all through South America, even up until now, many of the poor communities, communities of color, indigenous communities of color have been kept illiterate. And I was in Venezuela maybe about 5 years ago, and I met someone there who told me that they could not vote, that a lot of the poor people in Venezuela could not vote because they didn't have an ID card, and they couldn't get an ID card because they couldn't read or write. But once they were able to get their ID card, and once they were able to be educated, they were able to vote. And we see this playing out right now. Well, I mean, it's always played out in America. This is why in poor communities of color and Black communities, the educational system is so poor, and the lack of qualified teachers, the lack of supplies and materials that students need to be successful has never been there. And until this very day, it's still not there. And we see that playing out in the move to suppress the vote by asking people, telling people that they're going to have ID cards in order to vote. So, you know, this was such an important piece of material that he presented to the people of the world. I mean, all over the world, he is renowned for his book and renowned for his efforts to create, you know, an educational system that will be able to teach people so that they can understand what is taking place in their society. You know, even in the Black Panther Party, we understood how important education was. We required party members to read 2 hours a day. And a lot of people who joined the party were illiterate, and they could not read. But through being in the party, you had to read because that was a requirement for being in the party. So a lot of these young people did learn how to read. The first member to join the Black Panther Party was 14-year-old little Bobby Hutton. And when he joined the party, he couldn't read or write. Within a couple of years, after working in the party and working on the newspaper, he became head of the finance department of the Black Panther Party. So, but you know, the Black Panther Party has always had a strong connection to Brazil because our movements began almost around the same time. And I remember very clearly, there was a film came out. I wish I could remember the name of that film, but it talked about the military takeover of Brazil and the torture methods that were being used on the Brazilian freedom fighters. And one of the very important leaders of the Brazilian struggle was killed, I think about a month after Fred Hampton was murdered. Also, there was a pamphlet that I remember seeing in 1968. It was called Mini Manual of the Urban Guerrilla. And it was from Brazil. And it made its way from the streets of Brazil to the streets of America. And that was something that we were able to use a lot because we were both engaged in different aspects of resistance. So,
Aaron, Alini told me that I was supposed to give the speakers a 5-minute warning.
5 minutes. I'm
so
sorry.
No, that's all right. If you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, I do. My closing remarks are, I lost track. If I think about it, I'll come back to it. But thank you anyway.
All right, thank you so much. The Pickford is great in letting us have it, but they do have another screening, so we have to clear out. Next, we have Catherine Murphy, who is an independent filmmaker who has spent much of the last 15 years working in Latin America. She is the founder of director of the Literacy Project, a multimedia documentary project on adult literacy of the Americas. And after a call with our persuasive executive director, that's self-referenced there, Catherine generously allowed us to show her film and agreed to join us in the celebration and panel from her home on the East Coast. So thank you and welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay? Great, wonderful. I was going to set myself a timer for 5 minutes, so I was afraid I'd go on. So I'm happy to know that you'll, give me the time out when necessary. First of all, thank you so much for this event. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be joining you all, to be honoring Brazilian Black Consciousness Day. It's a huge honor to be speaking here together with Aaron Dixon and to have heard from Australia Tobon. And thank you, Alini, for bringing us all together and making this happen. It's also an honor to be having this dialogue, to be honoring the legacy and the work of Paulo Freire, and to be having this dialogue on the centenary year of his birth. He was born on September 19th, a century ago. So, so this, and looking at this work and what does it mean for us today in our various communities in the United States, in the Americas, in Latin America, the Caribbean, Brazil of today, and the world. So with the film that you just saw, A is for Angicos, as you see, focused on the early work of Paulo Freire, the early pedagogical work that was happening in the field, in the trenches, in the early 60s before the Brazilian coup happened. Well, this work was supposed to go, I was so interested to hear what Australia was saying about this, using this term co-creators, because, and what we tried to show in the film, because it has Freire and 10 other people. And of course, we worked on this film for the last year, but all in conditions of pandemic. So we had planned to go to Brazil and do some original filming. We couldn't do that. So it was 100% archival footage from 15, 16 different sources, including this 1964 film by Luis Lobo that shows the work that was happening in Angicos, and that only survived the dictatorship because Luis Lobo himself took the original film reels out into the countryside and hid them in the backyard of a friend's house. He says he buried them in the backyard. So, in some way that they that they survived till now. And Luis Lobo was a close advisor to us. So looking at this work, so this work was happening, what they were doing was what they called cultural circles. And I think it's significant that they weren't using the word literacy or literacy classes, and they weren't using the word teachers or professors. They were conducting what they called cultural circles, and the teachers were coordinators. They were called coordinators. They created the vocabulary together with the folks who would be their students. And they worked in a number of communities in the Northeast. Angicos is most known and most celebrated because of Luis Lobo's film, because there's images that survive that tell the story. But the plan was that this would become a national program. In the communities in the Northeast where they were working, were about 75% illiterate, largely farm workers. And there was this sort of feudal, post-slavery or semi-slavery system that was very entrenched, and illiteracy, as Aaron Dixon was saying, is like a pillar to structural racism and exploitation and class oppression. So teaching literacy, yes, as an important thing in itself, but also as a tool for transformation, as a tool for critical dialogue, for people, collective consciousness raising, people reflecting on their lives and thinking about how to change them. And this core philosophy of Freire's that, yes, reflect, but act, that reflection must be connected to action, and action for transformation, for collective transformation and liberation. So it's no coincidence that the day after the Brazilian coup happened, on April 1st, 1964, Paulo Freire was arrested in his home on April 2nd, 1964. Was sent into prison for 70 days and then sent into exile. And he lived in exile for 16 years. He wrote his first book in exile, and then many, many books after that. Pedagogy of the Oppressed, obviously being the most well-known and eternally critical, foundational reading and study, philosophical material for all of us. but so, you know, and then he of course went on to, like, based on this early pedagogical work, to apply it all around the world, in Guinea-Bissau, in Angola, in Sandinista, Nicaragua, and inspired a lot of work in the United States. That's part of what we're starting to look at to do a longer film. So I guess, you know, it's just, I keep just coming back to wanting to say what an honor it is to be able to poner un granito de arena, they say, to give a drop of contribution to us continuing to know about and learn from this legacy and apply it today, in the face of emboldened fascists in the United States and Brazil and elsewhere, and certainly all these crackdowns on liberation education, you know, in this with CRT, critical race theory, which is obviously just a crackdown on talking about race and racism, talking about the real history of the United States, talking about a country that's been based on stolen land and stolen labor, and how that legacy is still alive today. So in the honor of Paulo Freire and the work of the Black Panther Party and the Farmworkers organizing and so many more, this film is for all of us to continue to work.
That was impeccable timing. Thank you very much.
Great.
Finally, I'd like to introduce Mestre Silvio Aleixo dos Reis. Mestre Silvinho, as I know him, he is my teacher. I'm very lucky. Mestre Silvinho is my teacher. He has over 30 years of experience in capoeira Angola. And he has traveled the world to share his knowledge of this wonderful art form. Mestre, para você.
Thanks for the invitation. Whatcom organization. I mean, it's such a great pleasure to be here, participating in this panel and give a little contribution. So good in Australia, and nice to meet you, Mr. Aaron Dixon. Thank you so much. And Catherine, thank you for the amazing work that you did for the movie. I'm Brazilian, I'm from Brazil, and it's 5 minutes. I just want to share a little bit about the impact of my life with the work of Paulo Freire. I was born in 1969, and during the period of the dictatorship, I was a kid, and I grew up on that. And I remember in my 5, 6 years old, the word communism. It's like in my family, you know, and I didn't understand what it meant, but it was something like, for me as a kid, was something horrible. I love some cartoons and some books on magazines. I love the X-Men. Every time they're around, I translate in Portuguese. And my dad was a big fan of the army, and he passed away when I was 8 years old. He served the army, and when he saw me with his cartoon, that's communism. Oh, we cannot be that. And I grew up with that, with that. The fear. I think that was the idea behind it, to promote that fear for being that some people could not explain, just saying that because it's bad. And we cannot understand that, because if you understand that, you're going to go to think about it, and start to think about it, when it became critical. When it became critical, came the transformation, reinvented the word, you know, like Paulo Freire said. And when I was a kid, when I was a young boy, I didn't read so much. Just later in high school, I had a teacher that, or somehow, handled me some rules. One of them was Paulo Freire. First reading in high school, college, I didn't understand so much what was happening. But later on, capoeira came to my heart. And through culture, to art, came to me information about I'm understanding and seeing myself what means being a Black man in Brazil at this time. Understand the history of my ancestors and the culture of that. That I didn't have access to school, you know, I was doing more into that, but even though all the work that Paulo Freire did, there was a lot of work that, for for the right wing is trying to be undone and still around today. That attack as the work of Paulo Freire, his legacy lives on. It's up to all of us to keep that. Through the art of capoeira, the understanding the ancestrality, the diaspora, and the African roots, that give me inspiration, that give me more understanding to make the similarity of the art of Paulo Freire and the art of capoeira, and what means being a black male in Brazil, and how can be myself and be able to transform their reality in the community that I work with. I never thought of it being Italian, talking about my life, about what I do, and how I try to connect with the community. And Paulo Freire became one of my mentors that I read a lot of books again and again and again, and try to understand that, how I can bring the word. And this month in Brazil, the Black Conscious Month, Black Conscious Month is every day. You know, but at the end of the day, not just one day, I think we work in needs every day, but there is a day that the Black movement in Brazil since the 70s fought to have a moment to discuss, to reflect about, that idea, And I'm here to sing a song for you with my instrument. I'm a capoeirista master, and a teacher, that's the big model. The song is about it's going to be Portuguese, but it's about Black Conscious Month, it's about November 20, and yeah, just for you.
From the audience or the final remarks from the...
Obrigado, Mestre.
Thanks, Mestre.
I think we have time for one question, if anyone has a question, either from any of the panelists. Also, the panelists only see my face in a black background, but I assure you that there are people here, just so you know.
You could probably hear it.
Yeah.
Already stuck.
Oh, I have vision in game.
Sure.
Oh,
What would you recommend would be the most important action that we can take as community members to help support the promotion of education and equality and the things in our own community?
Suffering.
oh, do you have a specific person who you want to ask?
No, to the whole group.
Oh. There's a question about maybe, Aaron, if you'd like to take that. The question was, what would you say is the most important action that individuals could take to support education in our local community? I don't know if you.
I think one of the most important actions that people can do is for the parents to start teaching their kids about different types of readings and being an influence on them, on their kids, and wanting to learn to read and teaching the importance of reading and the importance of education and how education does lead to transformation and it leads to liberation.
Thank you. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to respond. Mestre?
Mestre, Mestre.
Se você quer responder à pergunta da. What's the most important action that you think that people can take to advance education in our community?
I think for me it's like art is hopefully powerful, is strong, for mestres da cultura popular.
The people who are masters of popular culture, who are.
Make sure, in your community to support, promote that culture. Like Aaron Dixon said, to reinforce the reading. There's so much knowledge in the popular culture that's not recognized. But with academic culture, how come we can work together and celebrate the culture? The culture being an element of transformation, not just celebration. Celebrate but transform. Support those people, those masters, the masters that have the popular culture, and now lately have been recognized by the academics, by the college, but don't elevate that level of culture for the change, for a better word. That's my idea.
Obrigado, mestre. Catherine?
I'm having a hard time picking a thing. I think there's sort of a list. I was trying to write down this list. We spent a number of years traveling around the United States with our previous film, which was called Maestra, about the Cuban literacy campaign, the national campaign for full literacy that happened in Cuba in 1961. And traveling around the United States, one of the women from the film came from Cuba, and we traveled around the States a lot. We actually started in Seattle. Thanks to Cindy Domingo and a number of local justice folks in the Seattle area. So what we heard from educators all around the country was that people were asking us, parents, teachers, students had a number of core demands to try, and struggles that they were involved in, to struggles to try to stop the privatization of education, to defend public education, to support teachers, educators, and teacher unions in particular, to get police out of schools and stop this sort of criminalization or prisonification of schools, criminalization of students and students of color, in particular Black and brown students and Indigenous students, low-income students. This teaching to the test is really bad, really damaging for kids, and it breaks down this ability for real dialogue and empowerment, education, and thinking, and stop the school to prison pipeline. So I think we have this fight for an education system but we also need to create our own structures or nourish our structures that are outside of it, community-based structures, popular education. You know, Aaron Dixon was talking about homeschooling, or, you know, schooling, like the kind of education that happens at home and in communities and in our villages, you know, of our movement villages. So I think inside and outside of the education system, we have a big fight ahead now and into the future to really have some kind of liberation education for, you know, kids and adults too.
Thank you, Catherine. I think we are right around the edge of our stretch time that the Pickford Film Center has generously offered to us. I just want to thank our panelists. If we can get a round of applause, maybe they can't see you, but they can hear you. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
Thank you so much. Alini was very intentional in having an event in which we would engage our minds first, and then we would engage our bodies and our emotions and our spirits. So everyone's invited to go across the street. It used to be the Black Drop Coffee House. What's it called now?
Welcome Road Winery.
Welcome Road
Winery.
Winery, just nearby. We're gonna have some music, live performance by some bands, some Seattle-based bands, one called Choro Loco. There's gonna be a dance instruction of a traditional partner dance called forró from the northeast of Brazil.
And a lot of the music here.
Oh, a lot of the music that you heard in the documentary was related. And then we're gonna stay on even later for music by another local band called the band.
Choro Loco, and then the Haj Tafarel. It's just the two.
Okay, and then Haj Tafarel will be the band that will play at the end.
It's
So
the instructor.
the
dance
instructor, the instructor. Okay. Again, thank you so much, everyone. We got to clear out to let the Pickford do their business, but please, we can chat a little bit in the lobby, or we'll see you across the street. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say real quick that even if you received the message that you were on a wait list or we were sold out, you can still come and join us at the door. There might be some vacant spots, so you can just wait for your name to be called and join us. I want to thank you all one more time for being here with the remaining of my voice. I want to thank Mateo for being my voice for the most part. And I just can't tell you how much joy it is to bring these amazing panelists, all of you, to share a little bit of my culture just a week before I finally get to cross the border for the first time in 3 years and see my family and see my comrades, right? I think that it's so intentional that we're segregated, that we're disconnected from culture, and that we're not allowed to connect with each other and build international solidarity and political education and consciousness in a way that will actually advance all of our liberation. So that's the job of the center, and that's the job of the Pickford. And I just want to thank, and that's the job of each one of you too. So I just want to thank all of you for being here today, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. This was
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry
Thank you
for
so much. Can
leaving
I
you
take
all.
it's okay. Can I take a screenshot before we hang
Yes,
up?
please go for it.
Thank you, Alini. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you, Aaron. I'll look forward to
Thank you.
talking with you both in the
See you
future.
guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Power
Bye.
to the people.
All
All
the power to the
people.
people. Hey, Aaron, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.